What is going on, everybody? We're going to continue on our journey of adding Java to our NX workspace by figuring out the next step in this process. We got the code running inside of our NX workspace. We're able to run the front end and the back end at the same time. But how do we go about getting this back end out of our monorepo and onto somewhere where we can actually hit a live URL and get all the data back for our app? How do we push this to production? What do we want to do here? Now, with the typical front-end app, we're pretty used to how to deploy these. For most cases, we're going to use existing providers like Netlify or AWS. But how do we actually go ahead and take our Java program and actually get that out to some place that we can, interact with? Do we need to make sure that our hosting provider has a JVM installed? What are the things that we need to do to get this app up and running and available to us for our production use case? Well, thankfully, we actually don't need to worry about any of that because we have a technology that's going to help us out here, Docker. And we're going to use Docker along with NX's release command to be able to automate the release and deployment of our Java program as a Docker image. So let's dive into it. So if you're unfamiliar with NX release, I would come over here to our managing releases page on the documentation. We have a whole page going over what NX release does behind the scenes. And we actually have a course put out from Yuri on Epic Web where we go over how to version and release NPM packages. While this is focused on NPM and JavaScript packages, the fundamentals are still going to be applied here for our Java app. And if you're unfamiliar with Docker, it's a way to take pre-existing setups for virtual machines and package them up so that way they can be deployed to various environments using a single image. So we have everything containerized, and that way we can just drop it inside of AWS, GCP, and know that that platform is going to be able to run the same environment every single time. In this case, we're going to be creating our own image based off of some pre-existing resources that are available out there, and we're going to be deploying it to a Docker hub, so that way this image will be available to multiple places, and we can pull it down depending on where we end up hosting it. You can see in this case, we already have one pre-built called Narwhal Mike /Sir Tusky. We're going to create a new image based on our workspace that has a React front end and the Java Spring Boot backend. Now, for all of this to work, we're actually going to be using a pre-release version of NX and some packages that we have coming up, mostly because this is still experimental. We're not quite ready to release it, but you can expect the same workflow to work once it does release. Now, to do this, we're going to come over to our workspace and we're going to add a new file to this Java backend directory. We're going to create our own Dockerfile. Now, the Dockerfile is going to be how Docker will be able to spin up our environment for us. So for starters, we're going to add a new image. We're going to bring in OpenJDK and version 26. And this is from a maintainer on the Docker hub. So that's where all these resources are going to be pulled from. Next, we need to expose a certain port. Now, our Java backend runs on port 3000. That's how I've configured it. So I want to expose port 3000 here. So that way, when this does get deployed, Docker and the platform that we deploy to know which port to listen for. Next, we're going to add this copy line, and this is going to take the actual resource that we build, the jar file, and it's going to copy it to an app.jar file. This is basically just going to be a simple way for us to have a resource that we have a version that we build from, and then we have the deployable target that is just something simple, so we can blow it away if we need to. And then finally, we're going to give it an entry point. This is going to be how Docker actually starts up our application. We're going to give it the command of Java, a flag of -jar, and we're going to point it to that app.jar from the copy step. Now, in theory, we could just run our build from NX and then start Docker manually, but that is a lot of work and it's kind of a pain. we can automate a lot of this using a new plugin called NX Docker. So let's get out of here, and then we're going to add a new plugin. So we'll run nx add at nx docker, and it's going to go ahead and install a pre-release version of this, and it is going to warn you this is experimental. There probably, maybe, most likely will be some breaking changes as we get further along with this. So we've added the plugin, and then we've also went ahead and updated our nx.json. What do we do for that? We've included this new option in here for @nx docker to give it some inferred tasks. So that way we know how to run the various tasks for the projects with Docker. Now, technically, this is all we really need. We could run our Docker build, and it's going to generate an image for us. However, we did have some small changes, and this is very unique to this project. You probably won't need to do this. Because in our Dockerfile, we expose that port 3000, we need to tell Docker that it needs to do some port forwarding for us. So let's go to the project.json for our Java backend, and we're going to add a new entry in here, and it's going to be for the Docker run. So it's going to go ahead and it's going to tell the underlying command that it's calling to pass in the port 3000 and forward that to our localhost 3000. So now we can actually start to get that information from the backend as if it was running locally. So now with this change to Docker run inside of our project.json, let's get out of here, and we're going to run nx docker run, and we're going to give it the project that we want to target. So in this case, it's Java backend. We'll hit enter, and it's going to run an actual build first. And you see that we had it cached, so the build was actually super fast. And then it's going to go ahead and run the docker:/run command. So all of this is actually running inside of Docker. We don't actually have any Java running on our machine locally. We should be able to just go ahead and go over to our localhost 3000. And if we reload, we're going to be able to get all the endpoints from this API. So we can go ahead, we can say API, give me all the products, and we can see all the products are being returned from the API. So great, we have Docker working to our advantage. We're spinning this up. How do we integrate this with our release? Now, to get this Docker set up to integrate with our release command, let's open up the nx.json, and we're going to enter in a new release object key. This release object key is going to be how we configured the release command. So for that, we're going to first give it a project. In this case, we could give it an array of projects, but we're only going to target the Java backend because this one is going to be a little bit more unique in how we release it. Next, we're going to add a project relationship. This is basically going to tell NX whether it should release everything together or should it release things as separate packages. We're going to pick independent here to release things separately. Next, we have a release tag pattern. So this is going to be how we build up that release name. In this case, we have release, and we're going to give it the project name and then the version that we're going to use. Next, we're going to add a Docker object with a skip version action. Where basically you're just going to tell this release to not infer any versioning that's going to happen and to just release everything. So we don't have to worry about it too much. And then finally, we're going to tell the release to generate a changelog. For demo purposes, there isn't going to be much in this changelog, but if you have a more feature-rich project that has a lot of Git history, you might want to generate that changelog so that way you know what's in each version. Now, one last thing we need to do, let's go over to that project.json again, and we're going to add a release object to the file itself. And in that release object, we're going to add a Docker object, and in that, we're going to set our repository name. This is going to be the name of the project that is going to be on our Docker Hub, where we will publish this archive or this image. This needs to match to the organization name and then to the repository name. much like a GitHub organization and a GitHub URL. Let's go ahead and save this. And then let's try to trigger a release. To trigger a release, we're going to run nx release, and then we're going to also set the first released flag for this, just because this is our first release. We're going to go ahead and it's going to go and run all of the build commands behind the scene for us. And then it's going to prompt us to pick what kind of release this is. Is it going to be a production or is it going to be a hotfix? We're going to pick production since this is the first release for us. And then it's going to go ahead and say, do we want to publish this to wherever we have our projects configured? For our Java backend, it's going to be published to the Docker Hub. So we're going to set yes, and it's going to go ahead and publish everything for us. Cool. Once that has been completed, we'll get a little successful message printed out for us, and we can go over to the Docker Hub to verify that everything is uploaded. Cool. We can see that we have Narwhal Mike, Java app, and it's been published less than a minute ago. Now it is an image, meaning that we can point any of our hosting providers to this image in the same way that we pointed our own Dockerfile to some other existing image. Now when we go to say GCP, we point it to this image, it'll go ahead and spin up a new instance of this app for us, and we'll be able to deploy it and have it ready for production use cases. Now all that's left is to actually deploy this to whatever hosting provider you'd like to use. The main thing that we covered here was how do we actually take what is a collection of files inside of our computer and package it up into a nice, meaningful Docker image that can be deployed wherever we want. So if this is exciting to you, please let us know in the comments or let us know on GitHub. We'd love to hear your feedback. Cheers.